Coming up on this episode of the Dad Hat Shenanigans podcast.
Now, if my dad had a normal job, that would have been drudgery. But my dad was a sportscaster. So his work involved things like interviewing Muhammad Ali at his home and, going and watching the Dodgers pitching coach, teach work with Oral Hershites, right? We've kind of made it really hard for young men. And you see that my son's 6, but if you go to 16 or 26, it's even harder. And we have, 8 out of 10 suicides are men, and young men are going to college at lower rates than women are, and certainly than they used to. They're just having a much more difficult time at life. And the lefty message is that masculinity is evil. Masculinity is bad. You shouldn't want to be a man. Being a man is bad. It's part of the patriarchy. It's, so it's almost like they want to eliminate masculinity altogether. And the righty message is the polar opposite of that. If you can be vulnerable but still be resilient, you're way tougher and you're way more masculine, in my view, than you are if you just have high fences and high walls around your psyche. Anger and shame are our reflexes a lot of the time. At least they are for me. And I can't think of a time as a parent when that has been the appropriate response. And the only way to not have that response is to get out of the Conan the Barbarian brain and get into Sherlock Holmes' brain. Excellence lies in failure. You need to fail and fail and fail and fail and fail in order to be excellent.
Shaun, every dad has that story that just lights them up, that they love to share about being a dad. What is your funniest dad story?
My funniest story, it's actually when I was a kid, and it's actually more about my dad. So it's the Monday morning before Christmas. It's 1983, and my mom is leading my dad by the arm towards the front door of our house, and with my 5-year-old brother and me following behind out of curiosity. We don't know what's going on. And she opens the door and she yells, "Surprise!" And my dad's Christmas gift is parked on the side of the road. And outside of our house, the Christmas gift is a brand new Datsun 280ZX. It is, it's golden mist, which is 80s speak for brown. And it has this optional T-top roof. And it had, as we would say in the 80s, it had this bitchin' set of aftermarket sheepskin seats. And my mom had bought this for my dad. She just absolutely used to crush Christmas. And so that day, my brother and I were off. We were off to school. It was Christmas. It was the Christmas holidays. And so my mom was making my dad take my brother and me to work with him. Now, if my dad had a normal job, that would have been drudgery. But my dad was a sportscaster. So his work involved things like interviewing Muhammad Ali at his home and, going and watching the Dodgers pitching coach, teach work with Oral Hershites, right? And so there we are with the winds in our hair. We got the T-tops stowed in the trunk, and we're going to the beach to interview Mark Richards, who is an Australian surfing champion who was in town. Now, the beach in question was somewhere between 20 minutes and 9.5 hours away from our house, depending on Los Angeles traffic. So, as is my dad's custom, we stop for drinks at 7-Eleven. My dad, he gets this big gulp of Mountain Dew, and which was that was his poison, man, and still is, actually. And I got a slurpee, a cherry slurpee, which is also what my brother wanted. And at that point, as we're sort of walking towards the counter to buy this stuff, my dad belatedly realizes that having a 5-year-old in the back of his brand new car with brand new sheepskin seats with an open container of bright red cherry stain for the rest of the drive isn't the best idea in the world. So he tells my brother no. But this is patently unfair, right? My dad and I both have drinks. I have the exact same drink that my brother wants. Like, that's not right. And so my brother, he's kind of a schemer, and he knows not to throw a tantrum. He knows not to cry. He knows that stuff's going to backfire. He just kind of gets sad. And so I struggle with that. And so I tell my dad, I'll vouch for him. Like, that's going to work. But it kind of does. And he kind of stares at us, and we stare back with our sad, pleading, pathetic faces. And he relents. And so we get our Slurpees, and then it kind of hits us. Oh, wait. Like, we can't spill. We die if we spill. But my brother is being really, really careful. And it's like, it's going to work out. And I get in, and I'm being really careful, and we're going to succeed. And eventually we kind of settle into a rhythm, right? And we're kind of enjoying the drive. First, we couldn't enjoy the drive or the drink because we were all worried. But then we start to get a little bit relaxed. We're listening to 102.7 KISS FM. Wind's in our hair. The drinks are mostly gone. This is going to work out fine. So when we finally pull in to the parking lot at the beach, my dad parks his car. We open the doors. We start filing out of the car. And we hear this soft, sweet, innocent voice come from the back seat where my little brother is sitting. And he says, "Dad, do you have a towel?" And he had spilled probably about half of his Slurpee all over the back of this car. It was stained to high heaven. It was absolutely, absolutely destroyed. And that became a story we told in our family. I've probably told that story 1,000 times. And, frankly, we would rather have the story than the car, right? That stain became this inflection point that we could tell this awesome story about, "Dad, do you have a towel?" And that became a thing in our family. And it was really kind of drove home how much more important your relationships are and your stories and your family are than the things. But the things feel so important, right? But it's really the relationships that you have that are really meaningful there.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, MyPillow mattresses and MyPillow mattress toppers as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard MyPillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
Welcome to the Dad Hat Shenanigans podcast, the unfiltered truth of being a dad. Real dads, real stories, unfiltered, candid conversations on fatherhood. I'm your host, Brent Dowlen, and my guest today is Shaun Dawson. Shaun, welcome to the Dad Hat Shenanigans podcast.
Thanks so much, man. It is an absolute honor.
I'm really excited, Shaun, and you started off with some great stories this morning. It's morning when we're recording this, guys. Sorry. I don't know what time you guys are listening to it. But Shaun, for those of our listeners who are not actually like watching the video of this on YouTube, we got to explain the dad hat. I'm seeing a Dallas hat. You said you're in California. What's going on?
So I live in San Diego, California, which for me is the best city on the planet. It is just an absolute. I get a lot of my power from the sun, and we get 364 and 1/2 days of sun in here in San Diego. And it's just, I've got great friends here. I like to fly airplanes, and it's a great aviation community. But I grew up in Dallas, and this is a Dallas rugby football club hat, and my brother played on the Dallas rugby team, and he was really big into rugby up there. And I am a large man. I'm 6'5". You can't necessarily tell from my voice or from the video, but I'm 6'5", and I have a proportionally sized head. But that means my head is enormous too. It's very, very large. And so my whole life, I've never been able to wear hats. And I just kind of mentioned this in an aside to my brother. And my brother goes, "This is a huge problem in the rugby community. Like, everybody's got a big head in rugby. And so you need a rugby hat." And he sent me this hat. Just, like a couple weeks later, I ended up with a hat that showed up in my mailbox. And since that time, my brother and I have fallen out. Really, we're not really on good speaking terms anymore. And we went from a place where, man, we were so close. He lived with me for a while, and gosh, man, I could just tell you stories upon stories of how close me and my brother were. We fought a lot when we were young. We're 3.5 years apart. We just were at each other's throats all the time, boys, as you can imagine. By the time we were adults, we were so close. He was absolutely 100% my best friend. And yet, with time and the erosion of time, our relationship got really frayed, and it got really, really tense. And we started just the gears started grinding. And and I made some mistakes. He definitely made some mistakes as well. And I ended up not wearing this hat for a long time, because it symbolized kind of a different time in my life, and it almost felt like a betrayal. It felt, and now I think about how fragile our relationships are, and I think about how important it is to tend to them and to give people the grace and the assumption that they have the right intentions, right? And that's kind of what happened with my brother and me, is we weren't doing that. And we were so close, and we got crossways with each other, and it felt like we were each other's enemies to both of us. And it just got it. And the people that are closest to you can hurt you the most. They know which buttons to press. They have your secret stories. They know exactly where to put that shiv in your back. And you can hurt them the most, right? You do the same thing. And life's too short for that. And so it just reminds me, this hat is a source of pain for me, and it's a source of also nostalgia. And it reminds me that you got to protect, this is a precious resource. Your relationships and the goodwill that you have with people is a precious resource, and you need to marshal it, and you need to husband it.
Now let's get some context. I think my earbuds are messing up. Let's get some context here, just for our listeners to establish, who are you? What do you do? How many kids do you have? Just a quick overview. Who is Shaun?
Yeah. So my name is Shaun Dawson. I'm a tech entrepreneur in in San Diego, California, and I host the Raising Men podcast. I have two kids. I have a 6-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl, and it's interesting. I watch my kids kind of grow up into the world, and I'm not too worried about my girl. My girl, though, our culture and our world is going to welcome her with open arms. She's going to, I mean, nobody has an easy time of it, but she's got a lot of cards stacked in her favor. My boy, on the other hand, he's loud, and he's rambunctious, and he's wicked smart, but he's also, I mean, he's all over the place, and he doesn't want to sit down, and he has a hard time staying in one place, and he wants to entertain everybody, so he's telling jokes and all of that stuff, and all of these things make it hard for him to be in school or in certain settings and all of that. And what I'm realizing as I'm watching him, kind of, and while he and I are figuring this stuff out together, is that our culture we've kind of made it really hard for young men. And you see that my son's 6, but if you go to 16 or 26, it's even harder. And we have, 8 out of 10 suicides are men, and young men are going to college at lower rates than women are, and certainly than they used to. They're just having a much more difficult time at life. And I view my job as I've got to figure out how to give my kids the skills to thrive in our world, in the world that they're going to graduate into. And I realized that the world that my boy is going to graduate into is so much different than the one that I did, that it is not, my reflexes aren't necessarily adaptive, and I need to figure it out. And that's what the Raising Men podcast is all about.
Shaun, you're striking a chord deep into my heart. Men is what actually pulled me into. I told you this is one of my multiple podcasts. I'm actually a men's podcaster and coach, and this is near and dear to my heart for the same exact reasons. I looked around. I used to be a youth minister, and I started looking at young men and the world they were growing up in and what they were being equipped for and how the world was interacting with them and not exactly made for them anymore. And it's like,
Yeah.
and it's actually how I ended up in podcasting, is those very questions.
Same journey.
Keep me
Yeah.
up at night.
Yeah. And I also found that a lot of the online content that's out there,
It's trash.
It's trash. It's
trash.
I mean, it's junk food, right?
Mhm.
And there's not a whole lot of nutrition, and I wanted to be part of the solution.
Right. Yeah. I do not have the biggest following in that world, and I credit it to one thing alone.
Yeah.
I'm not extreme.
Yeah. You're not willing to be an asshole.
Right. I'm realistic, right? I don't need a hard pendulum swing that doesn't correct the problem, that just amplifies the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Some of the men who are out there talking in the manosphere, God, I hate that term, are just repulsive. They're doing more damage than they are good.
Yeah.
But I won't go to this extreme because that's not where health is found. That's not where actual productivity lies. But you have to be really polarizing to really get the attention, right? Got to be a little nuts, a little stupid to one extent. And so, but that is part of why I did my show, was like, that's not the right answers. These don't actually help young men.
Yeah.
It just, gets clicks because it's polarizing.
That's right. Yeah. It's just triggering to the other side. And that's the whole strategy. That's the strategy of going viral online. That's the strategy of being, that's the strategy of making money in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just have to I just have to put good stuff out there and trust that it will go to the right place. And and you can't worry about that. You can't try to go viral. You can't try to create the controversy, because it shouldn't be controversial.
Yeah, I find a lot of I've refocused where most of my content is actually aimed at guys to their mid 30s and up.
Yeah.
Because that's usually when men start making sense and start looking around and going, really?
Yeah.
2 and 2 aren't making 4 here.
That's right.
And they actually are starting to open up to the possibility that maybe they weren't given good instructions to start with.
Yeah.
But that's what we're diving in today, right? It's talking about raising boys and raising men. And let me ask you, one of my biggest pet peeves is we have not changed the instruction booklet in over 100 years.
Right.
We are still raising young men with the same playbook that our grandfathers were raised with.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And every guy knows it. It's the P's, right? Preside, provide, protect. That's it. That's your whole role as a man.
Yeah.
Go get a job, raise a family. There you go. That's it. There's no other instructions. And it's just not, as you said, life has changed radically since you were a kid, right? Your son is growing up in a different world.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that same playbook's going to work. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. 100%. It won't work. And I don't think, you talk about the dichotomy, right? And, a lot of the online conversation is around, so in my view, there's kind of a lefty message and there's a righty message. And the lefty message is that masculinity is evil. Masculinity is bad. You shouldn't want to be a man. Being a man is bad. It's part of the patriarchy. It's, and so it's almost like they want to eliminate masculinity altogether. And the righty message is the polar opposite of that. It's no, all that stuff, coarseness and cruelty and being a jerk, that is virtuous, and we're going to embrace it. But that's not masculinity at all either. It's not masculine just to be an asshole. Like sometimes you need to be an asshole to be masculine, but that's not the rule. That's the exception. And so that's online discourse that has been evolving over the last 10 years, where it's really, really, really polarizing, has created what I consider to be a masculinity crisis, where we've lost the definition of masculinity. And it actually hasn't changed. It really is. It is about being a provider and being a protector and creating a world that planting trees, the shade of which you'll never sit on, right? Creating a world that's better than the one that you were in, right? And those two things are the same, but the tactics, so the overall strategy is the same as it was for our grandparents. That's fine. But the tactics are totally different. And it's not, it's about, you need to have a lot more empathy than our parents had. You need to be a lot more vulnerable. You need the skills that you need in order to succeed in our modern society are totally different than the skills that you needed when I was growing up. And so we need to identify those and figure those out.
It's interesting to me because the things that people label as masculine, right? And I agree for the most part. The left just, it's all bad. It's like I said, that's where I came into this at. It's all bad. Everything that people identify as toxic masculinity, I would identify as a lack of masculinity.
On 100%. That's not masculinity at all.
It's insecurity.
That's exactly right.
Guys who are masculine and secure in themselves have no need to be the asshole all the time, to mistreat anybody, to, just be all those things they say we are. There's not a need, right? Yeah. Have you ever been around like tier 1 operators like Navy SEALs and stuff?
I have, yes.
Right?
Yeah, I live in San Diego, so we've got a lot of those.
Yeah, you got those guys there. Have you noticed they never need to announce their presence are that they're not the guys starting fights at the bars. They don't need to like walk in and prove anything.
That's right.
There's a reason. There's a masculinity, there's a presence that comes with that. They are secure in who they are. They know who they are, right? There's that knowledge of self, that knowledge of this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I'm capable of. It's a lack of insecurity that presents as masculinity. In my
That's right.
opinion, that's what I've observed.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. And what's more masculine? Being able to beat somebody up, or, coming up on somebody breaking into your car and, beating them up, or never having to be in that position in the first place. All right.
I'm a movie and TV junkie. You did you watch The Witcher?
I watched probably half a season of that show, and I liked it, but it never really took, or I didn't have that time or something. But I did like it.
There was this scene in the first season where he's at this formal banquet at the Queen's Dinner Hall, and two young lords are arguing over they killed this monster, and it's like, yeah, right. And so someone says something, well, let's ask The Witcher, and he's like, yeah, they've never done that. And then bows out politely to let them save face. But someone asked him about an experience. He said, it's like, I got my ass kicked. And it's just totally like, yep, blah, blah. And the queen is like, a man who can, throw that out there, his own failures with absolute, that's a man worth talking to. And it was like, yes, totally secure. I know who I am. I know what I'm about.
Yeah.
It's the best thing.
Yeah, one of the metaphors that I like to use for that is who's the tougher boxer? The guy who has an impenetrable defense and just you can't break through his punches, or you can't punch through his defense, or the guy who can just sit there, or Rocky, the guy who can just get wailed on time and time again and still gets up, right? And that's the difference between projecting strength and having the high walls in your castle and all of that, and being vulnerable. If you can be vulnerable but still be resilient, you're way tougher and you're way more masculine, in my view, than you are if you just, have high fences and high walls around your psyche.
So how do we shift and start helping our boys and young men learn to make this transition? Because a lot of us, right? I'm almost 46 at the recording of this. How do we start helping our young men? Because like I was not raised with vulnerability. I was not raised. I got more of it than a lot of people did. My father was a minister, and he had, for a 6'5", 350-pound man, he had a much softer touch than a lot of guys of that size, right?
Right.
My dad was very emotionally. He had a good emotional IQ, especially for a boomer age male, right? I hate to use that term, but I was still raised with a lot of those same premises, right? So how do we, as dads now, start to equip our young men for this?
Yeah. So I asked this question of every single one of my guests, one way or another. And I've talked to some really, really smart people. And I'm starting to accumulate themes along those lines. And I'll tell you what the themes are. So the first theme is the vast majority of what you need to do in order for your son to develop those skills is to model them yourself. So it starts with looking in the mirror. The what everybody says, and it's 100% true, and it's my experience as well, is a kid will not listen to what you say, but they will watch very closely what you do. And so the very first thing is to model the appropriate behavior, vulnerability, all of that with your children. That means you apologize to your kids when you've made a mistake. Kids learn a lot better about how to deal with mistakes if they watch you make them and you cop to them and you say, man, I shouldn't have done that. I'm really sorry. if that's appropriate. And that doesn't mean falling on your sword when it's not appropriate, but it does mean taking responsibility for your mistakes and owning up to them. And I think that's something that previous generations would never have done. They would have considered it weakness to admit that they ever failed. And so we have to, the first thing is we have to model it. The second most important key, I have this metaphor that I like to use of, we have two brains in our heads, really. There's the limbic system and there's the prefrontal cortex. I call them the Conan the Barbarian brain and the Sherlock Holmes brain. And the Conan the Barbarian brain and the Conan the Barbarian brain is the part of our brain that is very reactive. It is the part that you engage when you need to jump out of the way of a moving car or fight a saber-toothed tiger or a wolf or something like that. And we, as men, we have a lot more access to that part of our brain. That part of our brain is a lot more dominant than it is for women. And that part of our brain is much, much less useful in our modern society than it was 10,000 years ago, or even 100 years ago. And so we need the skill of being able to drop in and out of the Conan the Barbarian brain. It's a much more important skill for us than it is for the rest of society. And, you know, unless you happen to be in a profession where it's life or death, you almost never actually need the Conan the Barbarian brain. You need that. You don't need to operate in it. You need it to inform you. You need to use the data it's telling you. But the best thing is to stay in the Sherlock Holmes brain and leverage. In the Sherlock Holmes brain, you get to leverage all the knowledge you've ever accumulated. You get to leverage all of, you get to develop new skills. You get to learn. Over in the Conan Barbarian brain, you can only react. And you can only train. And you can only, you can't think. But in Sherlock Holmes, you can. And increasingly, in our modern world, you need to be able to think. You need to be able to leverage your learnings as opposed to your training. And that means staying calm. That means taking a beat before you react. As I said before, I'm a pilot, and one of the things they used to train the World War II pilots in their emergency checklist is the very first item on the emergency checklist was wind the clock. You think, okay, I just lost my engine and I'm going down, and they're telling me to wind the clock. Like the airplane's going to be destroyed in less time than the clock's going to be wound. And the reason you do that is it forces you to take 5 seconds and just relax. Okay, I know how to handle this. I've been trained. I can deal with it. And I'm just going to wind the clock so that I don't get into this frenetic activity. But oftentimes, as a dad of a boy, the boy's out there doing crazy stuff and he's, irritating people or doing whatever. You want to just react and stop and yell at him and all of that stuff. And that is almost never the right thing to do. Anger and shame are our reflexes a lot of the time. At least they are for me. And I can't think of a time as a parent when that has been the appropriate response. And the only way to not have that response is to get out of the Conan the Barbarian brain and get into Sherlock Holmes' brain.
I love that. I one of the things I teach in with couples and relationships with both your kids and your spouse is pattern interrupts to de-escalate a situation.
Yeah.
And you can do this with your kids. I teach this for kids as much as I teach this for married life. You just have to engage two of their senses. That's it. You can.
That is a really good insight. That is such a great insight. Yeah. And so you can touch them while you say something, right?
Right.
And yeah.
If an argument is
what a beautiful insight.
If an argument is starting to ensue or they're starting to like yell and fuss, all you have to do is point one direction and snap with your other hand. Your brain can't do both.
And that kicks you back into Sherlock brain.
And
the Conan the Barbarian brain can't handle both of those inputs, and so it knocks you back into Sherlock brain. Yeah. That is fascinating.
It's all you got to do is engage two senses. My sister is a special ed teacher as well, so I get a lot of great insights from her.
I'll bet.
But it's yeah, all you got to do is just engage two senses, and you can
Yeah.
instantly de-escalate an argument with your wife or a shouting match with your kids pretty quickly.
And part of the challenge there, that's an amazing tactic. It's really, really great. Part of the challenge is sometimes you don't want to, right? Yeah. You want to escalate. You want to hurt this person. They hurt me. I want to hurt them. And that's the thing. I mean, you have to train that out of yourself. Mm-hmm. If you feel that way, that is maladaptive. You wouldn't want your kids doing that. You don't want your spouse doing that to you. That is never the right thing to do. And it's, you got to train yourself out of it. But and then you can use the tactic, right? If you don't want to, if your instinct, if your desire is to escalate, well, it doesn't do you any good to have a de-escalation tactic.
See, I think I'm blessed in that. I think I have it actually easier than boy dads because I have two girls.
Oh yeah.
My instinct is always to protect my children, right? And that supersedes the instinct to continue to escalate.
Yeah.
Whereas a little boy, it's natural. You challenge your dad. I challenge my dad all the time. Yeah. I remember flipping my dad over my shoulder when I was 17 years old. Just because we were playing. Wow. It was just a game.
I have this image because you've described physically your dad, and he was not a small man.
No.
And so
we were playing before church one Sunday. Like we were getting ready to go to church. And he's like, "Oh, you think you're a tough guy now just because you're, 6 foot and like I worked out all the time." And he grabbed me around the shoulder. I said, "Dad, I'm going to put you on your ass." He's like, "Yeah, right." And he tightened up his grip. My mother, my grandmother, and my sister walked out on the front porch in time to see my dad sail through the air and land on his back.
That's beautiful. Wow.
And my mom ran over and was like, "Are you okay, honey?" Patting me. My dad's like, "Is he okay? I'm the one on the ground."
I've done a lot of some of my guests have been talking a lot about rites of passage, and that experience for you, that was a rite of passage. Kind of physically overcoming. Your dad. Prior to that moment, your dad was impossible to beat. For all intents and purposes in your mind. I mean, you felt like you could do it. You probably felt like you could do it, but you'd never done it before. And then after that moment, you bested him. You have now gone through the gauntlet and emerged successful. And one of the things that's happening in our culture that is really detrimental to men is we're losing those institutions that created those rites of passage. Church attendance is going down. There's no, those institutions are crumbling in favor of much more unorthodox and haphazard and bespoke institutions, or you kind of have to create that for yourself. Mm-hmm. But if you're not intentional about it, you don't actually create the rites of passage, that won't happen. And you got sort of fortunate; the rite of passage happened for you naturally, because of the nature of your relationship with your dad. And, but that's another thing that we really benefit from, that we need to figure out how to get back.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about demonstrating that. My dad was never afraid to show emotions in front of us. We had a very playful relationship. I could, and with my father, I could physically engage, right? With daughters, we have less of that habit. Yeah. And so, de-escalation techniques are good for me because I live with 4 women. My mom lives with us, my wife, I have 2 daughters, live with 4 women. So de-escalating is a thing, right?
But at least do you have a male dog or something? Do you have anything?
No.
Nothing. It's the worst. My mom was the opposite of that. We had all boys. And so, yeah.
My brother's the same way. He had 3 girls and his wife, and it's just
you're being punished for something, my friend.
See, I frame it this way. Research has actually proven that if you go through the special forces community, guys who are more prone to those kind of positions in the world actually tend to have females more often.
I have heard
So that's
that
what I
as
tell
well.
myself to make myself feel better
Yeah,
about that.
I have heard that, and that. So I've never known whether that's an actual thing or whether it's kind of an urban legend.
No, they've
But
actually researched that.
yeah, and that's really interesting.
So I tell myself that.
I
That's how
love
I
it.
square
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that. It's like,
So yeah,
obviously,
it's nature's way of testing.
but with boys, yeah, you've got to get out of that because you have that challenge mindset, father son, right? And it's part of growing up as a boy. You need to challenge your dad to find your place in the world.
Yeah,
You have to hit that mark, that rite of passage where it's like, okay, I can stand toe to toe and be a man with my dad.
yeah, yeah. I have this. So a lot of being a child is this tension between independence and connection. You're trying to seek both of these things, and they're opposite sides of the same coin, right? You can't be independent but sit in your mom's lap, right? And so the instant I kind of started to understand that intellectually, and I could see my kids. I'll give you an example. Last night, my daughter um, came upstairs where my wife and I were watching television, and it was well past her bedtime. So she had been put to bed about 45 minutes earlier, and she came upstairs and said that she was scared. And she's not scared. She has no reason to be scared. There's nothing scary. There's plenty of lights on. The dog's in her room. Her brother is in her room. Everything's like, there's nothing to be scared of. The reason that she's saying she's scared, to my wife, the reason was she's trying to manipulate us into letting her sleep in our room. And that is kind of true. But the other thing that's also true is that she's seeking connection. And that and so the solution to the problem, now, we don't want her to sleep in our room, in our bed. That's kind of a special treat that we allow her to do every once in a while, but that can't be the norm. And so there's two possible solutions. It's just, we can take the hard line and say, no, you're not scared. There's nothing for you to be scared of. Go back to bed. That's one way to do it. And that might work. But the other thing to do is to recognize that she's seeking connection and give her that connection. The reason she wants to sleep on our bed is not because she's trying to, she just wants to sleep on our bed. That's the way it feels to her. But the reason she wants to sleep on our bed is because she wants to feel more connected to her. I've just been out of town for 2 days. And so partly the reason that she wants to feel connected is because she hasn't had any time with daddy. And she has a lot of time with daddy normally. And so she might be feeling that. And so, I went downstairs with her. I helped her. I held her. And I put her back to bed. And now that I can't do that every day. Like I can't have her getting out of bed, an hour after her bedtime and then being able to, and then, interrupting what I want to do. But in this case, it's justifiable. Like we have to reestablish the connection a little bit. And then I make a note, well, tomorrow maybe I'll do a little bit of special time during the day in order to do that. But if I didn't understand how to frame her behavior in terms of connection seeking or sometimes independence seeking, then I wouldn't know how to satisfy that need in a way that wasn't just shutting it down. And shutting it down is, okay, fine. Sometimes you have to do that, but it does kind of damage long term. If that's the only tool you ever use, it's gonna backfire later in life, I think.
That's incredibly insightful. I don't think that's something that a lot of men know they should be looking for is don't answer necessarily the question or the situation that's presented.
Yeah.
Answer the question that's actually or the situation that's actually presented.
That's right.
You knew your daughter's looking
into
for
the
connection.
deeper root cause and address that. It's tough to do in the moment. It's really hard to do.
I've had a lot of times where a situation is escalating with my child and I'm like, what's actually happening here?
Yeah. Yeah. And you gotta wind the clock. If you wind the clock, then you can get to it. But if you just react, you can't.
I'm familiar. I don't go down the line on everything on the whole Stoics thing, but it's one of the things I look at a lot of the Stoic philosophies because it's like there were some. It's like anything other thing, right? There's some great principles in there,
Yeah.
right? Is it perfect? No, but there were some great principles in there, and just the idea of response versus reaction,
Yeah.
right? Stealing yourself before hitting that primitive brain.
Yeah.
It has a lot of value, but I don't think a lot of dads realize that there's something behind it. When your kid's doing something, it's not necessarily what you see, it's not necessarily what you hear, right? There's something else
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. It is in my case, my boy is so much like me. I actually remember feeling, I can recognize feelings in him that he's not expressing because I remember feeling that way, right? I remember being frustrated in the exact way that he's frustrated. And he's saying that he's frustrated about X, but he's really frustrated about something else. And I remember that from my own childhood. I remember feeling that way. And that's really helped. That has really helped with some realizations and being able to have that empathy, understand where he's coming from, and then address the root need versus whatever the surface request is.
Shaun, let's start winding this out. We've touched on a lot today. We've talked about boys and the very fact that it is a very, very different. I think for a lot of fathers, that's the first step
Yeah.
is understanding that that was one of my dad's weak points. My dad did not understand as a Gen Xer. I was at the tail end of Gen X that the world he grew up in and the world I was growing up in were so radically different. Like he's like,
Yeah.
no, it's all pretty much the same. There's a few like, no, it's radically different.
It is.
As
What?
right as in my age group with my daughters at 11 and 13, their world is so radically different
Yeah.
than ours was.
Well, and they're girls, and you were a
Mhm.
boy, and so you almost benefit from that because you kind of throw out all of the reflex. You're like, okay, well, I mean, they're girls, and I was a boy, so I don't necessarily know how to deal with stuff. Maybe I use their mom as a testing block for those sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, if you have boys, you don't have that. You can't. You don't have that. There's not a. It's not obvious that it's different, but it is so different. And just as it was, yeah, exactly, just as you said, just as it was when we were kids, our dads grew up in such a different life. Our kids are growing up in such a different culture than we did. In fact, it's 10 times as different.
For sure. I think a lot of us in the tech industry benefit. We see that easier
Yes,
because we track technology.
You're right.
Right?
Yeah.
I had the Motorola Star Trek flip phone. Yeah, I had the first modern cell phone style back when that was out.
Right.
And
I did
just if
too.
you look at phones, right? The difference between that phone and my iPhone that I carry every day is the difference between throwing a rock and a nuclear missile. It's a totally
That's
different
exactly right.
thing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think in the tech industry, we see that a lot easier than some people do.
Yeah.
But I think that's a big step for a lot of dads. We've covered so much today. If our listeners caught nothing else, what do you want these men to hear?
I think I would say that excellence is failure. And I think that our reflex from when the time that we were younger, it was drilled into us that you got to succeed, you got to succeed, you got to succeed. And the fact is, the unpopular truth about that is you don't succeed eventually unless you fail a gazillion times. Right? Michael Jordan has a quote about I missed 10,000 shots, and that's why I'm a great basketball player. Right? And I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact quote. But excellence lies in failure. You need to fail and fail and fail and fail and fail in order to be excellent. And you just have to keep getting back up. And you just have to have your eye on that ball. And so that means you need to give yourself the grace of, when you fail, it's not that big of a deal. Actually, it's a step in the right direction. And that goes for other people too. When your spouse fails, or, your wife, or the mother of your kids, when, give her the grace too. She's trying her hardest also. Give her the benefit of the doubt. And, maybe you'll find eventually that she wasn't, and you'll have to deal with that. But you're much better off erring on the side of assuming the good intentions and all that stuff. And excellence is failure, and you want to be excellent. So let yourself fail.
Shaun, if people want to continue the conversation with you, where's the best place to find you?
So yeah, my website is raising.men. The podcast is called Raising Men. Please like and subscribe. Give me feedback. If there are guests that you'd love to see or questions that you want answered, send them to me. I'm really, really, really accessible. We're on all the socials, and so definitely please look me up and please engage. I love to interact with people, and I just love this topic, and I love having these conversations.
Guys, as always, we'll have Shaun's connection points down in the show notes or the YouTube description. Whatever platform that you are joining us today on, I will make sure that you can follow up with Shaun. I think there's a lot of value there. So go check out Raising Men. Another great podcast for dads. Like, the dad community is so near and dear to my heart. So please go check out Shaun's podcast after you get done with this one. For Shaun and myself, thanks for joining us today on the Dad Hat Shenanigans podcast. We're just a community of dads navigating life's challenges together. Until next time, laugh, learn, and live the dad life.